Hello, welcome again to another little rambling of mine over a small collection of games that I have on hand. There are a lot of games that over the years I've lost or were borrowed and never returned. So I'll never really have a full exhaustive, you know, collection of these games. It's just they disappear to time. But today I'm just going to talk about a few of my favorite PS2 games. There are many more than this that I consider to be favorites, but I just decided to consolidate it into just, you know, a smaller selection just for this. So we have, as you can imagine, for just about anyone's favorite PS2 games, it wouldn't really be much of a collection without Kingdom Hearts. So Kingdom Hearts was a game that, like a lot of JRPGs and games from, well, Squaresoft at the time, I was just drawn to the general aesthetic. I mean, if you just look at this case, I still think this is one of the better looking PS2 game covers. It's just, you can look at it and get a sense of what the game is trying to at least convey. I mean, it does a lot with this cover art. It's just very iconic, and I like it better than Kingdom Hearts 2's cover art, if you can believe it. Of course, given my profile picture with Zexion, it should be pretty obvious that I quite like Kingdom Hearts as a series. Um, Whether we'll get Kingdom Hearts 4 in our lifetimes is another question and conversation. But my mother actually, growing up, similar to me, was actually interested in a lot of tech and gaming. And she actually encouraged me to buy this game. Normally, kids have to beg their parents to buy them something. But in my case, it was my mother was like, you should buy this. It looks pretty awesome. So I remember just seeing a commercial for this featuring Utada Hikaru singing Simple and Clean. And for some reason, that song sold me on the game before anything else. So, but yes, I actually prefer some of the gameplay elements of this over the second game because Kingdom Hearts 2, I feel, well, I think it was an improvement in many regards. I kind of did like the slower paced combat in Kingdom Hearts 1, as well as the fact that I feel that, you know, the Disney aspects were a bit more naturally integrated into the story. There was kind of a charm and a magic in this game that felt very natural. And it was just a nice, immersive introduction into a new world with new characters. Of course, I, like many people at the time, thought it was a bit strange to blend Disney with Square Enix, or Disney with Final Fantasy rather, because it certainly wasn't called Square Enix at the time. But it was an interesting mix. And I had never played any Final Fantasy games prior to playing this, so this was my introduction to some Final Fantasy characters as well. Um, I really do think that Sora will always be an iconic video game character, which is why I was so excited way back when he was announced as a Smash playable character. It was something that was destined to happen, really. My only question is, I wonder what Sora's mom was making him for dinner that night. We'll never know. Up next, really no surprise, Kingdom Hearts 2. I know a lot of people were really a little bit adamant in their distaste for the Roxas, the Roxas tutorial segment. Even back then, I actually really loved it. I love learning about new characters, especially when their stories intertwine with, other characters. I think the way that they handled Roxas, I don't know why I keep saying Roxas. I'm pronouncing things weirdly tonight, but Roxas. And I think his story was actually more compelling and interesting to me than Sora's. whole perspective in this part of the adventure. When the summer vacation ended, it really did feel sad, and I found myself wanting to play with Roxas more than Sora. But yes, this game I feel was an improvement in just about every regard, combat especially. But there's just something really, I would say that the game, for what it gained, it also sacrificed some things. The combat could come across as a bit button mashy at times. And that's not really necessarily due to an inherent flaw. I think it's just that due to the faster pace, as well as the reaction command introduction, it can create a situation where you feel like things are so much more high octane, more fast paced, that you kind of just have to, the cadence is just faster, so it gives rise to maybe a little bit more button mashing. Though I don't think it was egregious, it was just noticeable. But in terms of story, the Organization 13 was probably the single-handedly the best thing they could have done narratively. I mean, Axel is my favorite character, really in all of Kingdom Hearts. Um, right next to Roxas. So go figure. Organization 13 are the GOATs, and I just can't think of any kind of video game franchise that had a villainous group that resonated with me as strongly as Organization 13. They really had the drip down pat. I mean, from head to toe, they were dripped out. And yeah, Sora could never hope to look as cool. But regardless, it was a big step up in a lot of regards. And I think this game really solidified a lot of people's, permanent love of Kingdom Hearts as a series. This was kind of the I'm on board moment for a lot of people. And for good reason. Next is quite a bit different, a bit of a divergence from JRPGs or Square Enix or Squaresoft. Is Jak and Daxter. I love how vibrant this cover art is or looks on camera. But this was, alongside of Ratchet and Clank, my first bunch of PS2 games. I thought this game had very fluid and responsive gameplay, and a lot of that is really due to just the quality of the animation work. I think they used a technique called squash and stretch to animate the characters in this game. But nonetheless, I thought that for being a collectathon, it was a really nice introduction into this kind of gameplay style. I don't know if I would say it's reminiscent of Zelda per se, or even Mario 64. When people think of collectathons or these kinds of 3D adventures or early on, they tend to make their immediate comparisons to things like Zelda or Mario, but I don't know. This is clearly inspired by the collectathon era, but it felt like it had its own identity to me. I just thought that, you know, this game kind of had an iconic vibe to it in the sense of, the trio of Jack, Sly Cooper, and, um, Ratchet and Clank, the three that are kind of iconic to PlayStation. But this was just a memorable game for me because I found the locales to be very well done. I thought it looked graphically very nice. And again, it was technically my first PS2 game, so I have a nostalgic bias towards it. This disc inside is scratched the hell up. So I don't think it can even be played anymore. We were really rough with these games. It's really sad, but great game. Now, talk about a change of tone. I think this is almost my favorite PS2 game. Very hard, very challenging, very much not for someone who's impatient. But I love the route they took with this game and what they did with Jack. They made him into, I guess you'd say, a badass, but it didn't seem like it was without purpose. It wasn't bereft of purpose. This is one of those games that was edgy in a way that made sense. This was an era of gaming where things were becoming very cool, the rule of cool, and edgy, just for the sake of being cool. But I feel like this there was a reason for it. And I think it really fulfilled multiple purposes simultaneously. One, it fell into the era of the rule of cool. So naturally, it's just a good fit for that. But two, um, I feel that this was a pivotal point in time where the whole idea of a collective thought was actually kind of starting to phase out a bit. So you had to start adding different dynamics to your 3D platforming games to make them more, palatable, so to speak. And this absolutely checked that box of being more than just another collectathon, what have you. Um, I like this cover art too. Very much darker tone, cooler tones here generally than the first game. But man, this game was hard. Some of the missions were just hair-pullingly difficult. I think there was one in the sewers or something. I just don't want to talk about it. But yes, this was a very difficult game. But I think narratively it made sense. I loved Haven City and the cruelty of that city and just the dystopian narrative around it. I thought was just very enthralling. And this was the best you could have done for a sequel, in my opinion. Up next, gotta get some Dragon Ball Z in. This was my favorite. I always thought this was kind of a mouthful of a title. Like, we're gonna go play Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Um, but again, box art is actually relatively simple and effective. This game was a blast. I played it often with my brother in the sense that he would wreck my shit often. He would usually play as Android 18. Don't know why. But yeah, I love this game simply because of the roster size. Unfortunately, that also meant that a lot of the characters were kind of redundant in their movesets. So to that end, I would have a select few characters I would rotate through normally, but the rest of them were generally kind of hit or miss. I loved the beam struggles, and even though it seemed button mashy at a glance, there was a bit of depth if you were there to look for it. In general, I kind of preferred this to just Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, even though I thought that game felt more like a traditional fighter. This, I believe, is categorized as more of an arena style fighter, if I'm not mistaken. But this was great fun, and this has to be the most I've gotten out of a multiplayer experience for a PS2 game. Now to that classic trio again. Sly 3 was my favorite of the bunch. Sly 2 almost made that category, but I felt this was a refinement of everything. I just loved this game to death. I guess you can call it the last good Sly game. But man, I always loved games where you can switch between different characters. My favorite was actually playing as Bentley, which I feel is not a really popular sentiment, but I was always a nerdy guy, not so much into gadgets, but I resonated with him as a character more than I did the other two. But I really just enjoyed the set pieces and the levels in this game. I thought the mission difficulty was generally just right, and there was also a multiplayer component in this too, with a kind of cops and robber scenario featuring Carmelita and Sly. Again, my brother would wreck my shit in that too. So, common theme. I just suck at multiplayer. I always have. But yes, uh, I believe the fan favorite of this bunch is generally Sly 2. But for me, this one resonated a bit more. Not entirely sure why. It just seemed like a refinement. But great game. I actually had to replace this because the first disc was scratched up so badly. We had to buy another one. So I loved it enough to replace it. Now, this might seem like a really odd pick. A demo disc. Wow. How strange. Jam Pack was the shit. I love these demo discs. I mean, they introduced me to so many different games, including Silent Hill, believe it or not, Prince of Persia as well. Um, I believe this is Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal, which I also have, but it's not included here because I don't know where it is. But yeah, these really were an introduction to a lot of cool games. I think one of these had a game called Whiplash, where you play as a rabbit and some other animal creature, and they're literally chained together. But man, I would play the heck out of these, and it would also save a lot of money too. You could play a game, try it out. If you didn't like it, you didn't have to waste money on the full product. But these were normally at, I think, demo kiosks at stores, and you could just buy them for like what, $5 maybe. So yeah, I just love these simply because you know it was a simpler time where you could play a demo and somehow enjoy it. Nowadays, I couldn't fathom getting that much out of a demo. For me now, I either want a game or I don't. I don't really have to play a demo to decide that for me. Next is another PS2 classic, Ratchet and Clank. My mom loved this game to death, mainly because of the music. This game had some really awesome, I don't know the genre, spacey, space funk, electronic. I'm not exactly sure entirely, but the music was a vibe. It was a real vibe. And I just love the simple, effective premise of this game of hopping from planet to planet, getting a new weapon, and blasting things apart. Again, some great animation work. And pardon. And this was paired with Jack and Daxter for me. So these were our first two PS2 games, this and Jack and Daxter. So what a way to start off a gaming adventure in that sense. But this is a fantastic start to a series of beloved games. Um, Now, going Commando and Up Your Arsenal, I love them too, but I just picked this one simply because it was a start to something. And I don't think the remake of this game, I don't really like it, the remake. They really neutered their personalities and turned Ratchet into just, I don't know, they made him really too kind. It almost seemed very Pixar. I'm not really a fan of the new direction of Ratchet, but things change. Next is a game we'll never get a sequel to for many reasons. Bully. I love this game. I love school settings. I love anything where you can, actually have real classes or a sort of video game equivalent to some real life scenario. I love this game's story, the gameplay, the activities. It was a fully fleshed out game. Of course, in Rockstar fashion, it's going to be a fully fleshed out game. We will never get a sequel to this because the social climate won't allow it. And it's for good reason. People are very sensitive to the kind of content, subject matter in this game. If there were a sequel, I can guarantee it would get the worst kind of publicity, and not because the game is a bad game, but it's a product of its time. And I will cherish this game because I know it's a one of a kind. We won't be getting another. You can guarantee that. Next is a pretty obscure and underrated game, War of the Monsters. Has anyone ever heard of this? I feel like it's not in front of the camera. But man, this was fun. It kind of it gives you Godzilla vibes, you know, giant monsters battling in a city. There's a specific term for this. I can't kaiju, I believe, but nonetheless, this game was a lot of fun. And I do remember there were two unlockable monsters that you could play as, and they were quite difficult to unlock. I think in terms of finishing out the story, I do remember the game being a little bit difficult in some of the missions, the story missions. The multiplayer was fun though, and I would love to see a sequel to this. It is a game people just don't talk about anymore. Um, Last here, this is just for the sake of brevity. I have many more I could talk about. I might make a part two, really. But Ultimate Ninja 2. The Ultimate Ninja series is a long spanning one. And now, of course, it's Ninja Storm. I feel like they're kind of done with Ninja Storm at this point. So they might just move into another ninja titled fighter next, if at all. But I thought this was actually my favorite out of Naruto Ultimate Ninja, Ninja 2, and Ninja 3. Even though the fan favorite is Ultimate Ninja 3. Something about this one came into my life at a point in time where I was very receptive to anime. And this was sort of a gateway drug, if you will, into anime fighters for me. But yes, Naruto for me was defining, both in terms of my love for anime and in terms of just wanting to draw and create things and, be a part of a fandom. Naruto was a gateway for many people, for many things. Um, I loved Clash of Ninja as well. I really enjoyed Clash of Ninja 2 and Ultimate Ninja 2. I played them both kind of in tandem, really. But I suppose there'll be more to come for PS2 games, or I may just move on to something else entirely. But um, additionally, Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King is my favorite PS2 game. I don't have it on me for some reason. I don't know where it is, but it's in the house. I just don't know where it is. But that is a legendary JRPG. It's my favorite PS2 game, bar none. And that's saying a lot. So, with that said, I will just leave it here.